I think that I've got these ants that have crawled into my mixer, and the left channel is like kind of
It's
questionable.
bugging out.
It is bugging out.
Hey, everybody, this is Dan. I'm here with a special announcement / apology for technical issues. Upon reviewing this episode, I realized that my microphone was not working correctly. I'm not exactly sure if the answer to blame, but it sounds kind of crappy. I'm doing my best with it, but rather than re-record the entire episode and lose all of the magic that's in there, I just went with it. I promise when we cover the next album, it will be better.
Welcome to Backtracking, the show where two old friends take a second listen to influential bands' catalogs track by track. I am J. William Hall.
And I'm Dan Fidett. We'll be taking this journey together, providing context, both personal and historical, on some legendary bands. For our second season, we've picked none other than pioneering indie rockers American Music Club.
Today on Backtracking, if we sit here and drink enough beer, we'll be two inflatable podcasters backtracking American Music Club's sophomore LP, 1987's Revelatory Engine. The album was recorded after a period of substantial turmoil for the band and personal trauma for Mark Eitzel. It also marked the beginning of a fruitful, if strained, label relationship with Lisa Fancher's Frontier Records, a solidifying lineup, and a remarkable step forward for Eitzel's songwriting. Ooh baby, do you want to dance?
I sure do, JW. But before we wear out our welcome, let's set the stage. After The Restless Stranger was completed, the third iteration of the band coalesced around Eitzel and Voody, with Dan Pearson now on bass, Matt Sluggo Norelli on drums, and Brad Johnson, fresh off the cruise ship, taking over keys. The band began to play gigs primarily in and around San Francisco, but frustration quickly set in. Eitzel was unhappy with Sluggo's over-practiced drumming, while Sluggo was frustrated with Eitzel's unpredictable behavior on stage. Johnson and Voody weren't getting along any better, with Johnson feeling stifled by the band's somewhat professionalized approach. Nonetheless, the band decided to take a trip to Hamburg, Germany together, which quickly turned into an extended stay. While AMC rehearsed and played a few gigs while they were hamburgers in paradise, the change in latitude did not engender many changes in attitude. Norelli and Johnson left Germany and the band just before Christmas of 1986. Dan Pearson returned to San Francisco shortly thereafter, and Voody and Eitzel were close behind. Eitzel was not pleased.
And neither was Tom Mallon. He'd spent a good deal of time and effort on the production of The Restless Stranger, only to have the band that recorded it dissolve and disappear. So when they returned to San Francisco, Mallon set Eitzel and Voody to work in the phones, flogging their album to radio. When that didn't work, Mallon took over promotional duties himself, while Eitzel and Voody tried to build yet another lineup for the band. Eitzel successfully recruited drummer Tim Mooney from a local favorite band called the Toiling Midgets. But before they could build any momentum, tragedy struck when Eitzel's mother was diagnosed with cancer, only a year after his father had died. So Mark returned to Columbus to be with his family in his mother's final days. Eitzel struggled during those 3 months in Columbus, but returned to San Francisco ready to throw himself back into the band. Once again, though, frustration set in, this time led by Mooney, whose drug problems had gotten bad enough that it interfered with his participation in the band. The unexpected upside was that Eitzel and Voody began to play solo acoustic gigs around the city, with Voody introducing folky instrumentation like mandolin and accordion, which would influence the band's sound for years to come. Mallon's tireless networking eventually paid off, as his grifter label was able to cut a distribution deal with Frontier. It meant Mallon had to get AMC back together and straight to work. So Eitzel, Voody, and Pearson were joined by a ragtag group of friends to record a classic that was forged in frustration and tragedy.
So what else was frustrating and tragic in 1987? The first Starbucks tragically opened, and The Simpsons were frustratingly featured for the first time on The Tracy Ullman Show. The first Artificial Life conference was held tragically at Los Alamos, and investors were frustrated by the Black Monday stock market crash. And finally, the infamous Max Headroom broadcast intrusion frustrated the FCC, but tragically stopped after only 90 seconds. JW, Do
Yeah.
you remember the Max Headroom broadcast Intrusion?
You know, you mention it, and it does ring a bell now that there was some kind of kerfuffle with involving Max Headroom coming in on, but I don't remember like if I actually witnessed it or
Yeah,
just, it was a big deal for 10 minutes or whatever. But
yeah,
yeah, do you know the
yeah.
story there? What happened? What did he
Well, I
do?
don't I don't know the full story. What I know of it is that again, this is kind of a pre-internet phenomenon, kids. So, pull up your beanbag. It's going to be story time.
Listen
This
to our tales of the time before the internet.
this is when television was broadcast not only
Huh?
through cables, but also through antennae.
What?
That
What does that
yeah,
mean?
and somehow I don't know how this was done, but some early what you would now refer to as a hacker essentially took over the broadcast of two different channels in I believe it was in the greater Chicago area, and basically cut off. These are like, NBC, ABC, CBS kind of channels, which were like the main channels, right? There wasn't a lot going on other than that back in those days. And
Biggies.
they knocked their broadcast off the air and basically just broadcast a person in a Max Headroom mask like moving around and saying some things. But it was on two different channels. One of them was able to get their own signal back within like, a minute. The other one lasted for 90 seconds. um but this was something that only existed in like folklore, because it's not like the video is instantly shared all over the world on Twitter or something afterwards, right? It wasn't really even until YouTube showed up that people were like digitizing these old VHS tapes that they happen to have of the broadcast intrusion, and putting them up online. So if you look that up on YouTube, you can see the actual hijacked broadcast. What I don't know is who did it, how they did it, or if they were ever caught. I suspect there may be a podcast out there about this topic, so you may want to, search your local podcast directory after you give us a like, you hit subscribe, and you share it to all your friends and give us a 5-star review, because fuck yeah.
Smash that like button.
So, JW, we are here to talk
Yeah,
about Engine. As we went over in the world famous scripted open here,
right,
this
right.
was an incredibly tumultuous time for the band. I mean, it is, we're going to talk about the substance of the album in a minute here. But set that aside, the fact that American Music Club, after basically a 6 to 8 month period filled with, absolute tragedy for Eitzel, difficulties in keeping the lineup together, just like a lot of just tumultuousness. The fact that they even kept the band together after all of that is kind of a miracle. Setting aside what is, I think an absolute step change in the band's sound, the songwriting. This is the album that really makes American Music Club in my opinion. But JW, what do you think about this album and the history leading into its recording?
Well, I've read a lot about American Music Club, but I have not read the book, um, Wish the World Away. And so,
Right.
I was only sort of like vaguely aware of that whole period between The Restless Stranger and Engine and kind of what was going on. And I kind of like didn't realize like that was when they went to Germany. I didn't realize that
Yeah.
these tragedies had happened and that the band had basically kind of like dissolved away, and that it
Yeah.
was, it sounds, you know, it sounds from what I said in the introduction, like sort of the thing that brought them back together was that Mallon got this distribution deal with Frontier, and then he was
Yeah.
like, we got to get, AMC back together, and they were kind of like, all right. And so, they had Eitzel, Voody, Pearson as kind of the core three, and then they
Yep.
have kind of a rotating cast of drummers and additional kind of people who help out on this album. But it is amazing, like knowing like how kind of messed up everything was behind the scenes, that the album sounds so cohesive, and it really does crystallize in my mind like this is the AMC sound, like at
Yeah.
least like the true starting point of it being kind of a cohesive thing.
Yeah.
Restless Stranger, which we spent a lot of time talking about,
Yeah.
um, it's just so kind of, it feels so scattered and kind of piecemeal. And
Yeah.
but this one feels like a working band, you know, just the mood, the instrumentation, like the sound of it overall is just like such a step up, and so much more cohesive than
Yeah.
Restless Stranger, in my opinion.
Yeah, no, completely agree. Completely agree. So why don't we'll talk a little bit more just about the prehistory, and then we'll get into the basics of how we cover all of these, right? We're gonna talk about the cover art a little bit. We'll talk about the overall kind of production arrangements, the overall sound of the album, and then we're gonna backtrack it track by track, as we always do. But I
Right.
know what you're
Always.
wondering, JW. I know what you're wondering. Why did they go to Hamburg in the first place?
I
Here is
am.
why. Here is why. So
Warum, as they say in Hamburg. Warum gehst Sie zum Hamburg gegangen? Ja? Jawohl?
So so my understanding here is that the band had recorded The Restless Stranger, right? The album was then finished, but it kind of was mastered and was being, pressed and all of that stuff at the end of that would have been 19, what did we say, 1986.
85.
85, I'm sorry.
Yeah, it was
And
recorded according to the album itself, it was recorded in July of 85. So, and it was
yeah,
released in 85, so it had to be late 85.
Yeah,
Um,
so
yeah.
so the recording was finished based on the timeline that I'm putting together in the book, sometime in like late summer, early fall of 85. And then it was and it sounds like basically after the recording, um it was one of the guys in the band. It wasn't Eitzel, it wasn't Voody, and I don't think it was Dan Pearson. So it was either Norelli or Brad Johnson. One of them had a girlfriend that was from Germany. And after the recording was done, he was like, "Hey, I'm going to go over and just spend some time over there with this girl." And the rest of
Im
the
Deutschland. Im Deutschland.
in Deutschland, and the rest of the guys just kind of said, "You know what? That sounds like fun." And they originally just went over there for a little vacation, like a couple of weeks. But because of some exchange rate thing that was happening at the time, apparently I guess this would have been the West German mark,
Right.
right? Because this is still
Deutschmark,
when
yeah.
this would have been when East Germany and West Germany were still were still separate. Um,
And
the they got over there. They had saved some money for this trip, but they got over there and the dollar was just going really, really far, and they were living like kings. So they were just kind of like, you know what, screw it. Why don't we just hang out here for a while? So they got like a little rehearsal space. They rented some equipment. They rented a van, and they kind of lived around in different places. But they were just kind of enjoying their time in Germany, rehearsing. They tried to get some gigs. They had a couple of gigs over there, but nothing that really like was, notable for them. And then eventually the Norelli and Eitzel dynamic, which we already know was strained, it became strained in Germany as well. Norelli and Johnson decided to quit the band and leave Germany. This is when Norelli went back to San Francisco, and Dan Pearson, kind of very quickly after those two guys left, he left as well because he's like, well, nothing's going on with the band, so I'm gonna go. He didn't leave the band, but he left. He left Germany.
mhm.
And then Voody and Eitzel finally went right at the end of the year. But the sense that I have is after that Germany trip, they had this completed album, but the band had kind of dissolved, It was like the drummer and Brad Johnson had kind of just, decided to quit. So now they were going to have to rebuild the whole band again, and there was this real strong sense of a loss of momentum. that Tom Mallon tried to rebuild by kind of cracking the whip on Eitzel and Booty as soon as they got back in San Francisco, because of course he had put all this money into recording The Restless Stranger and didn't want to flush it, right? He didn't want to hear that the band was, done with, and there was nobody that was going to be able to promote or support this album. So that's when Eitzel and Voody were tasked by Mallon with doing a lot of the promotional work, and that kind of went on, through the beginning of 1986. And then they sucked at it. Apparently, Mallon took those duties over. That was also when he was, working on getting this distribution deal with Frontier Records for two of his bands. I believe it was Thin White Rope and American Music Club that were included in the Frontier distribution deal. So when that deal got done, it included basically a requirement for a new AMC album. And so Mallon basically said, we got to record this next album pretty quickly. So they I don't know when the material originated from, probably lots of different time. We could talk about that.
Well, yeah, we'll talk about it.
But they went into the studio, mid to late 86 to record the album. Again, Mallon's studio.
All right. February/March 86 is when they recorded the album, according to
Oh, really?
the
What it says
album
on there.
liner.
Well,
I'm sorry. No, I'm sorry. February/March 87.
okay, that makes a little bit more sense. So
Yeah.
they were kind of bound. They were doing promotional work for The Restless Stranger for kind of the first half of 86, playing gigs, writing material,
Did the Germany thing.
And that was,
Okay.
again, there was 3 months where nothing was going on in kind of mid 86 when Eitzel was in Columbus, right? So
Okay. So I'm looking at I refound that weird GeoCities page that
yeah,
is American Music Club and Mark Eitzel tour history.
yeah,
And it seems to suggest, because there's a big gap between the end of 85 and before anything in 86 happened. So it was probably the first half of 86 they went to Germany, because that's when the big gap is. But then they
yeah,
get back, and it looks like in June, July, they start popping up gigs in San Francisco again. The one, a little diversion, I went down the Tom Mallon rabbit hole a little bit just to see like what else he released on Frontier Records.
yeah,
And there was this band called Flying Color.
yeah, yeah,
Did you
yes.
check them out at all? Did you listen to them at all?
I didn't actually, but I do remember them being mentioned in the book.
Yeah, they're kind of interesting, and they didn't seem to have like a life beyond. Like they only released kind of one album on there, and
Yeah,
I think that was kind of it. But it seemed like, he was trying to kind of promote them and AMC. I think there's like a
yeah,
split single or a split EP or something between Flying Color and
okay,
American, like right around in this Engine kind of era. It might
yeah.
actually have a couple of Engine songs on it. But anyway, that's a little diversion.
Yeah. So, all right, JW, should we get into the specifics? Should we really start our discussion here of
Yeah.
Engine by discussing, well, the basics? All right, it was the release date that I have here is January 87. That's what I found on Wikipedia. Now that may be
No.
wrong.
Yeah, because it
Okay.
says it was recorded in February and March of 87. So I-
Okay.
I'm guessing it was late 87.
Okay.
Um,
So, well, let's just say 1987. The album was released in 1987. Um, but on Grifter, distributed by Frontier, which is it was kind of an interesting business deal from what I can tell. Basically, Frontier didn't have all that much more distribution than Grifter. It was a pretty
yeah,
small label.
yeah, it's not like Frontier was like A&M Records or something.
No, but my sense is that basically Grifter was really just Tom Mallon, and he
Yeah,
just needed help, and he needed money, and they provided a little bit of both.
you needed
But
distribution. Yeah.
so I listened to my old kind of digitized version of the CD. Uh,
Mhm.
From what I can tell, this album is out of print. kind of completely right now. So other
Well,
than
you can get it on their Bandcamp page, on the
yeah,
AMC Bandcamp page.
that's exactly right. But it isn't actually in print anymore anywhere right now,
It's
unfortunately.
Yeah, it's not on Spotify or any of the streamers. I think it's, yeah, out of print.
Yeah, so we would definitely recommend going to the AMC Bandcamp and please, just pay some money for it. My understanding is that Mark Eitzel kind of runs that himself right now, that Bandcamp page. Yeah, I'm sure you can probably also find most of these songs on YouTube if you want a really lo-fi, crappy experience listening to them, which is not what I recommend. But if you're in a pinch, you can do it.
Or if you're a big fan of lo-fi.
That's right. That's right. That's right. So now the cover art, JW,
Mm,
I'm going to describe it. Feel free to chime in, but this is kind of a yellow tinted black and white version, yellow tinted black and white photo, really blown up like an old, film photo blown up. So it's pretty grainy. Um, it is a child, probably a child of about 6 or 7 years old, I'm guessing.
yeah.
Um, and then the name American Music Club appears in kind of a red stencil logo type in the upper right, and the title, the album's title Engine appears at the bottom, also in red and white. The real question here is, who is this kid on the cover? So if you, JW, if you know, I'm going to tell you what I found out, and then you can correct me. But I could not find this. So I went to, where did I go? I went to ChatGPT and I said, ChatGPT, I need to know some information. Please tell me who the child is on the cover. I got 3 different responses from ChatGPT. Okay. The first response that I got was, the child pictured on the cover is Vaylor Trucks, who is the son of Butch Trucks, who is the drummer of Leonard Skinner. And I thought, gosh, that is a very strange person to be on an American Music Club album. But I maybe that's true.
All right, file
And
that.
kind of really, really oddly specific. You know what I mean? It definitely felt like ChatGPT had a high degree of confidence. Then when I asked again, the next answer I got was, it's Tom Mallon's son. And the final answer I got was, it's Mark Eitzel as a child. So
Mhm.
I have no idea which of those 3 it is, but JW, it seems like maybe you know. So please tell me.
I do not know, but I have a faint memory of reading or something somewhere along the line of Geitzel as a child.
Yeah.
But one thing that I wanted to point out, which I only now realized, is that the color palette of this album cover is identical to the San Francisco 49ers.
Okay. All right. Yeah.
Do we do we do we think that's a coincidence? Is that a
I
coincidence?
I think that's probably a coincidence, but maybe not. I mean, maybe they're talking about the engine of the classic Joe Montana 49ers offense.
That could be. This was the heyday of the 49ers, so
Sure. Sure. Sure.
surely
Sure.
these colors were present kind of all over the place around San
Yeah.
Francisco because the team was so good, the fans, so they, you put a lot of thought into like, what's the album
Yeah.
cover going to look like? What's the colors going to be? Like, you put thought into that. Do you think that they thought, hey, winning formula, San Francisco 49ers colors, everyone's going to love it?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Maybe it's possible. That is, I'm not going to rule that out. I think the likelihood of that is about the same as the photo being of Vaylor Trucks, who is, of course, Butch Trucks' son. Butch Trucks, of course, drummer for Leonard Skinner.
Right.
So, now,
Huge influence.
to give you my impression of the cover art here, um, I'm gonna say this is one of my least favorite American Music Club covers. It may be my least favorite American Music Club cover. I'm gonna tell you why. I think it lacks the very atmospheric and landscaptual feel of The Restless Stranger, California, United Kingdom, which I think
Landscaptual.
Landscaptual. That's kind of are you buying that? Hey, these vast spaces, vast empty spaces, this kind of like, right? It's a broad horizons, right? Kind of
Hmm.
thing.
Yeah, yeah.
You, you know,
I'm not buying that landscaptual is a real word, but I know what you meant, so it
well,
should be. It should
I
be a
think,
word.
I think that, sometimes, you just have to be poetic in your description. So they're very landscaptual. I think JW agrees with me 100% on that. But then there's
Yes,
also the latter era AMC covers where they move into the paintings that we'll talk a
right.
lot about in the future. Those I think are nice and characteristic of the band in a very different way. They're very warm covers. They're like very warm, homey, kind
Mhm.
of, I don't know. I mean,
Odd.
they're yeah, they're
They're kind of odd.
they are odd.
Um,
They are odd, but they're
but
warm. I just think they're warm, right?
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
They're as
Um,
warm as the early albums are cold, I think, the Landscaptual ones. But all right, so you tell me what you think, JW.
um, I agree with you. This is my least favorite AMC cover. Um, and I'm not sure, I'm sure there was a process, that went into deciding like that this was going to be the cover, and there's a reason for it, but I think it doesn't help the music at all. Like
Yeah,
it doesn't have something that lets you in on what this music sounds like. And I feel like almost I mean, they definitely corrected this mistake with the next album, which,
yeah,
is one of my favorite album covers. But this one is evocative not of
yeah.
anything, and it's actually like a little bit disturbing because I feel like the photo of a child, it looks like maybe they're crying or
Yeah,
like afraid.
unhappy. Well,
And
yeah. Go ahead. Go ahead.
yeah,
You were gonna say.
and so like it's unsettling, but not in a like, ooh, I want to
Yeah.
find out more. It's more just like unsettling, like I don't know, So I'm not sure why, what was behind the story behind this cover, but yeah, to me, it's my least favorite of their album covers.
Yeah, I will say that in its defense, if if we believe that that is a photo of Mark Eitzel, if we in fact are willing to set aside the possibility that it is Vaylor Trucks, son of Butch Trucks, drummer of Leonard Skinner, and it is in fact Mark Eitzel, and he is unhappy, there is an undeniable influence knowing what's happened in Mike Eitzel's personal life over the year and a half roughly prior to this album recording. His mother and father both die, something
Hmm.
that's dealt with directly in the lyrics of this album that we'll
Hmm.
talk about in a little while. It really it could be a reflection of that period. There is certainly a lost, sad, lonely little boy that is present in many of Eitzel's lyrics,
This is
and
true.
that could just be a literal embodiment of that on the album's cover. I don't know that that would change my opinion of it. I still think it is less somehow indicative of the sound and feel of the band than some of these other covers that we've talked about.
Mhm.
If that is what's going on in the cover, I do, I do kind of I get it a little bit more.
Now, one thing I will say is that for as sort of, just unclear as the cover is in terms of back cover, the photo of
Yeah,
Eitzel Vudi and Dan Pearson
yeah,
on the back is this black and white photo. It's very evocative. It feels very like
yeah,
kind of dramatic, and it's
yeah,
dramatically lit, and I feel
yeah,
like this photo is really compelling in a way that the cover is a little more just like kind of confusing, or you don't know how to react to the cover.
yeah, yeah. I would agree with that. And my last comment on the cover, my own last cover on the comment. This is a little bit of a bugaboo that I have. Okay, I talked about it quite a bit in season 1 of Backtracking. One thing that I admire from a band is when they establish a band logo type and they stick with it throughout their career,
Mm.
which is, you know,
Rare, hard to do.
pretty hard to do, pretty rare, but when it's done and done well, I really think it's great. You know what I mean? I just really like that. But again, there aren't a ton of bands that do it. Rush definitely did not do it throughout their very, very long career. American
Mm.
Music Club doesn't do it. And I don't like the logo type that they use on the cover of this album. It's
Oh,
fairly, it's fairly it's not, really stylized like a lot of the Rush album covers. They kind of really stylize the logotype of their name on individual covers on many of the covers. It isn't really stylized, but it does feel to me now very dated.
yeah, I mean, it's got the, like, full justification thing going on where, like,
Yeah.
each line has got, like, everything's like, that I mean, that I think that's just somebody learning how to use I don't
But
know.
what was
I
it
mean,
before?
this would have been pre, doing it in Photoshop or whatever,
I know
so,
this could have been PageMaker. Was
I
Adobe
don't know.
PageMaker
I don't
available?
know.
You don't know,
'Cause
really?
this would have been like in '87. Like, I don't know if people were using PageMaker in '87. But but it yet there's still something about it that feels a little bit like somebody kind of learning to center things and,
Yeah,
kind of everything's very centered. But the one oddity about
yeah.
this back cover is that the songs are printed out of order.
Yeah, I wanted to bring that up. There are a number. There was a distributor in Europe named Zippo, I believe, that eventually distributed this.
Okay.
The songs on all of their printings of the album are very badly out of order. And it may have been on some of the other ones as well, but I know for a fact that the Zippo ones are all out of order.
I mean, I wondered if it was because it just like the song titles fit better, like if they put them a
Yeah,
little bit out of order or something. But I really like there's something about this font that they use that I really like actually, like this all caps like skinny.
yeah,
Um
yeah.
I
It's
like it on the song titles, like not
yeah,
necessarily on the cover, but like
yeah,
on the song titles, like I don't know, there's something kind of like I don't know. It
yeah.
could just be because I like, well, I don't want to give it away, but I love the album. So maybe that's why I like this font so much.
All right. So anyway, I think we've covered the cover. We have covered the cover
We covered the cover,
sufficiently.
man.
We've covered it. It is covered. The cover is
Now
covered.
the
So
one
why?
thing that okay, so now I mean, hey, this might be the only podcast to ever get in deep in the weeds of American Music Club. So I've got the vinyl here, and this is the one where the song titles are out of order.
Yeah,
It starts with Clouds,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
then I've also got not one, but two CD copies of this album because
Wow.
I think I have the Frontier release, and then I have they did a re-release of it in the 90s with Warner Brothers, I think. And
Yeah,
they
yeah,
have different bonus tracks on them or whatever. But on the back cover of these CD releases, the song titles are in order. So
yeah. Fixed it.
somebody between then and here was like, this is
Yeah,
confusing people. We need to put them in order,
yeah.
and
That was putting the songs in the order that they appear on the album was an innovation that really didn't take the record industry by storm until like 1989, I believe. Before that,
yeah,
it was just like let's just put the songs on the cover and whatever order feels right.
That's actually a good point because, it wasn't until CDs where people were really like, wait, is it track 3? Is it track 7? Like they didn't assign a number, to the
That's
track
right.
on the album until CDs because, prior to that you were
Didn't
listening to
matter.
vinyl or tape and you didn't. So,
Yeah.
yeah, good, just a little observation for the listeners out there.
I hate to quote myself I hate to quote
You
my
love to
own.
quote yourself. Don't.
Listen, there is a very wise person that I heard say this one time. That person, it was me. But when I said, I tweeted the other day, I said, um, something along the lines of only people our age remember that the real selling point of CDs was not digital audio quality. It was the ability to instantaneously go from one track to the next without
Yes,
fucking
yeah,
around. I mean, that was a huge deal, right? Like,
it
you,
was.
I mean, trying to find like the beginning of a specific song on tape could take 10 minutes.
Well, I remember it was a huge deal when some cassette decks started to come out with this sort of innovation where you could press this certain fast forward button and it would find the next sort of like gap, like
Yeah,
of
yeah,
silence, and that was
yeah.
how you could like kind of skip from. And I remember like for some reason, one of my parents' cars had this, and that I thought that was so rad. But the thing that sucks about that innovation is that I mean, I came to realize over time that I was addicted to the skip, addicted to the
Yeah.
fast forward button. And so like I'd have my iPod running in the car, on random or whatever, and I wouldn't listen to a full song of anything. I'd be 10 seconds
Yeah,
in, skip, skip,
yeah,
skip, skip,
yeah.
just like, and it's like that's not right. You
Well,
don't grow to appreciate and love certain music until you kind of like immerse yourself in it. You have to go to
right.
like a different brain space
Yeah,
instead of just like skip,
there
skip,
are
skip. Oh,
there are many people who ask the question, would David and David have been as popular as they were if the skip button existed back in those days?
this is
Because clearly,
Listen, David and David had a smash worldwide hit. Welcome to the Boomtown. If you haven't heard it, go check it out and
I
check out their lone album,
David
Boomtown,
and wait, the song
on
was called Welcome to the Boomtown and the album was called Boomtown, or was it
yes,
vice versa?
exactly. The album was called Boomtown. It was on A&M Records, big record label. It had one smash single, one minor single, Ain't So Easy, it was called. Tens it's a great album, but it's been forgotten, lost to time. It has no, bearing on anything today.
Yeah. I
So
think that
you heard it
I
here
think
first. Season 5 of Backtracking. David and David. It's going to be one
David,
episode. We cover the
welcome,
one album.
welcome, welcome to the Boomtown. There is really something, there's something to be said for naming your album, kind of paraphrasing a name of a song in your album title. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's like when Iron Maiden called their band Iron Maiden, and on the first album is a song called Iron Maiden, and the name of that album is of course Iron Maiden.
Yeah, I mean, in that case, I think when you've got the band album song title alignment,
Yeah.
if you can pull that off, you've got to.
Yeah.
And I can think of Talk Talk. There was a band called Living in a Box that had a song called Living in a Box off the album Living. And then what was the other one I was trying to think of? Oh, I lost it. But anyway, that brings us back around. If we can bring it back around to
You know,
AMC.
Space Hog almost did it. There's a song off their debut album called Space Hog. The band is called Space Hog. But unfortunately that debut album was called Resident Alien. But anyway.
See, they blew it. They
Um
blew it. They
yeah.
should
All
have they
right.
should have called it Space Hog and completed the trifecta. But
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about the title of this album. How do you
Yeah.
feel about the title engine for
Okay.
this
Okay.
album?
The title. I actually love the title of the album, and I will say that I think that American Music Club, through Love Songs for Patriots, perhaps, have a run of really fantastic album titles. Very plain, right? There's not much to the titles frequently, but I think the fact that they're relatively
Yeah, they're kind
playing
of
title.
evocative. They're sort of
Very evocative.
something. I always feel that AMC is very cinematic to me. I feel like
Yeah,
they create these moods, and so often their album title does kind of create like a
yeah,
intriguing, mysterious mood.
yeah,
Um, I agree. I like Engine. But
yeah,
the thing that when we were talking about bands that pull a phrase or a song title out and make that the album, I don't think there's any mention of Engine anywhere on this
yeah,
album, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, and
So
it's interesting to I would be curious to know why they called it Engine. I don't know that. I've never read anything about that. I think it's a nice title, but yeah.
I think
Okay,
it goes a
so
long way in for whatever the Venn diagram is for AMC, that they might cross into like alt country
yeah,
territory.
yeah,
An album title like Engine sort of like, helps them get into that part of
yeah,
the Venn.
yeah, yeah, yeah. And then a step beyond Engine towards alt country would be like Carburetor.
Right?
Right? The more specific you are
Dipstick.
about the components of an engine, the more alt country you are. So it's like, transmission would be like a little bit more, but then like,
Yeah.
carburetor even more, like
Yeah, like
ABS module.
automated braking system. The second album from American Music Club. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, so why don't we talk a little bit about the production of this album, just overall, the sound of it, the consistencies in the songwriting, really anything you want to get into. JW,
Yeah.
why don't you start us off here?
Well, the first thing that I think is really notable when we're talking about the difference between the production of the first album and this album, the drum sound is just like light years better on this album. Like,
Yeah,
the drums sound more real. They don't have that I don't know if it was the gated 80s effect, the Phil Collins effect or whatever, that they really tried to use that on the first album, and we talked about like why they might have been motivated to try that at the time, and not second guessing, but just like noting that, like, for this one, a conscious decision was made. No, we're
yeah,
not going to do that effect. We're going to make the drums sound like live drums, and I feel like the production is more like we're trying to make this feel and sound like a live band performing this. It's
yeah,
not it's not layers of keyboards, like Restless Stranger had so much keyboards on it, and this one has, very little keyboards. So
mhm,
it's more of a guitar album. It sounds like, almost like a bar band, but just like a really good bar band, you know?
y- yeah. Yeah, I would say that it is overall a less clean sounding album. It is still a quite a clean sound, like
You
when I
mean
say
clean, like
clean,
sterile, like a
yeah,
sterile album. Yeah.
exactly. It is somewhat less clinical and sterile um, than the Restless Stranger, but I do think it still has a bit of the sterility that I associate with a lot of production from the kind of late 80s.
Mm.
I do think there was just generally a lot of clean production in those days, and a lot of like almost I don't even know if this existed, but it was almost like post-processing effects. You know what I mean? So you'd get like a really clean sound when you record it, and then you'd mess with it afterwards, kind of in the mix or whatever. I don't even know if that's how it was done back then, but like that's the way I kind of think about it. It's just things were pretty clean. I think that, but from the product, the sound on this album, I think, is much more atmospheric. It is much more consistent from song to song, and it really, from a production standpoint, is the first album that I feel like kind of charts the course of what that AMC signature sound is going to be. And it's really pretty consistent, the production approach, until they switch producers with Everclear, right?
Hmm.
at that point, I mean, we'll talk about it when we get to Everclear, but I do feel like Everclear is a substantially warmer album than
Yeah, the sound changes for sure. I mean, it's interesting because you don't see a lot of bands have the same producer for like the first album, the second album, the third album, the fourth album, right?
yeah,
And
yeah,
and so like to sort of like watch a band evolve along with the producer, over
yeah,
four albums or whatever, and then yeah, Everclear, like, things kind of change, and then they're up on the big label with the big shots.
yeah, yeah. But it's but I do overall I dislike the production on The Restless Stranger. I just think it's flawed in lots of different ways.
Mhm.
I don't dislike the production on this album. I'm not going to say I love it. I generally prefer, and this is a debate that we can have as we go through here, but I generally prefer the kind of mid-era AMC sound, both the production approach and the instrumentation generally. I just think you know, when they get to roughly Everclear, they kind of have matured in their sound, and it's just more consistent. There are fewer songs that just sound completely out of place, basically. Right. But I do like the sound of this album. I would say that my biggest takeaway on this album is, if there is an we agreed vociferously in the episode where we discussed The Restless Stranger that it is not the first slowcore album. However, Engine, I think you could make that claim for. There
Well,
are multiple songs on this that are undeniably slowcore songs.
yeah, I mean, it definitely deepens the claim, that AMC were one of the like original proto or whatever, slowcore
Yeah,
bands. I mean, they're broader than that, obviously, but
sure.
there are definitely some like fundamental slowcore like
Yeah,
songs on this album, but that's not all the album has. Like for me,
no,
I love the production on this album. Like, and
really.
I don't know, yeah, like I'm gonna say it. I'm gonna let the cat out of the bag. This might I think this is my number one AMC album, like, of all
Really.
time. And I'm not sure if it's just because it hit me when it hit me, like at the age that it did or whatever, because, I heard California first and I was like intrigued but not obsessed. And then I got this album, and this album made me obsessed. And I'm not
Yeah,
sure what it is about it, but like, I don't know, just there's something about this album, like in headphones, it feels like you're like in amongst the band as they're just like jamming this album out, and
yeah,
I really like that. I like that all the instruments sound real. It doesn't sound overproduced. Like, it doesn't
yeah,
sound like they put too many layers on it or they had too many ideas. Like everything sounds like considered and just like, tasteful. But there's still enough of the wild energy from
yeah,
like their early, the kind of, theatrical big Mark Eitzel perform. Like, there are moments of that on this, but they're constrained a little bit. Like, they're selectively like put out there. And so there's such a balance between like light and dark on this album,
yeah,
and so I love it. I mean, maybe not my favorite production, but I love the production. So
yeah.
yeah.
I am knowing, having heard what you said, that this is one of your favorite, potentially your favorite American Music Club album, and knowing that you kind of discovered this so young. I can't wait, as we're going through track by track, to hear which really was the track or a couple of tracks that kind of got their hooks into you most. Um, but if if you're ready to dig into that track by track backtrack,
I am.
I am
I'm ready.
ready. All right, so let's do it. Why don't we set sail, JW? Side A of American Music Club's 1987 classic engine. It is Big Night, 3 minutes and 16 seconds. Music by Mark Eitzel, lyrics by Mark Eitzel. Let's go.
One,
Okay, JW.
yeah. I
Why
want to
don't we
point
just
out.
okay,
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 well, first, so we're
okay.
calling it side A, side B, whatever. But on the original vinyl pressing, which I'm holding in my
Yeah,
hands here, again, as they did on The Restless Stranger, they call it this side and that side.
sure. Yeah,
Just
it's
FYI.
junky. That might have been a grifter signature
Maybe it
thing that they
was.
did.
Maybe it
You
was.
know, maybe.
It's kind of a playful little, a strange playful little detail of an
Yeah,
otherwise, consistently dark kind of
yeah.
package. But speaking of dark, Big Night.
Why don't we talk about the lyrics first and then the music? But if you have a general
Okay,
comment,
I do. Well, you were asking before we, as
yeah,
we were introducing the album or whatever, what was
yeah,
the song that
yeah,
got its hooks into me that made me love this album? It was Big Night,
yeah,
honestly. Like
yeah,
from the opening chord of this song, the mood, it's
yeah,
so cinematic and so evocative, and just immediately I was just like, "Boo," I was in. Like,
yeah,
and I love how the vocal begins almost immediately, not on the
yeah.
first beat, but like on the second beat.
Second
And
beat,
and
yeah.
and and you're just like
Literally the second beat.
you're right in the song, you're right in the mood. And lyrically, I always loved the lyrics to this song. I thought they were super poetic and just like really, cinematic, evocative. I did not know, and I still really don't know like what the song is about, you know?
Yeah,
Um, but one of the things that I think is interesting is that I found out from digging into the Mean Mark Eitzel Gets Fat demo cassette that had been recorded, 5 years earlier.
yeah,
There's a version of Big Night on that,
yeah,
and it is so different. It's almost like silly, like in a way,
yeah.
like it's got the la 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 kind of like thing going, and it's also much it goes to wilder, bigger, like crazy kind of places, and at the end he's screaming,
Yeah.
I am the shadow, I am the shadow, like, it's so like it gets like super big and wild, and I'm sure like, early on that must have been the vision for how this song was going to be. It was going to be like, it goes from way down here to way up here, screaming and shouting. And, somehow over time it evolved into this opening track of Engine where it's just this like super,
Yeah.
the mood is maintained throughout the entire track, and it just sets the stage for the whole album.
It is the restraint in this song, the approach to the arrangement and recording of the song, I think is what makes it so remarkable. But I want to talk before I get into the overall on the music, I want to talk a little bit about the lyrics. I agree with you. The lyrics for this song are absolutely wonderful and incredibly evocative. But the fact that the you had mentioned the beginning of the song, right? The vocals come in almost immediately, and the first line is "Big nights are black and blue," which is such a great line, and really is like kind of a perfect example of how strong Eitzel's lyrics are throughout this album. There are moments of real beauty and genius all over this album lyrically, but this song in particular has a bunch of them. And I just think that first line is incredible. Um, he also on this album, you really see his gift for chorus lyrics that are incredibly memorable and evocative. That you know what I mean? There is something about a chorus of a song. You a catchy chorus, a memorable chorus is really something that I think, obviously is a hallmark of, good pop songwriting, right? Um, but a lyric that is both memorable and somehow off kilter, unusual. You know what I mean? It's like close enough to a phrase that you know, but it isn't that phrase and it spins it a little bit. This album is like really has Eitzel's ability to do that consistently on display. And this song is, I think, the first example of it. So the chorus lyric that I'm talking about, of course, is in any shadow that you can name, I'll be the shadow of your name. It's just such a like really cool, evocative, kind of creepy, but very beautiful lyric. And it's so memorable.
Yeah, and I'm reading over the lyrics now, and it's like you can't tell whether he's singing a romantic song, he's singing a song about tragedy, he's singing a song about friendship, he's singing,
Oh,
but it's got all of that in it, like different lines sort of like hit all of those different things. And so I feel like there's just so many like great turns of phrase. And I love the in the second verse, he says, when time peels off your statue skin, I'll still be fooled by what remains. Like
yeah.
just like like just cool, visual sort of turns of phrase, and it's just one after another kind of throughout the song. But then every now and again there's something like, yeah, I'm your friend, something real
Yeah, yeah,
basic that, it kind of keeps you engaged as you go on
yeah.
these little poetic flights.
I think that line, when time peels off your statue skin, I'll still be fooled by what remains. Yeah, whatever's left of you will be my dream, is one of the most beautiful romantic lyrics in any song I can think of. And when I was like thinking about the lyrics here, I was like, "God, that sentiment is just so beautiful and moving." And for some reason, it reminded me of like a generation later. How many millennials do you know that became deeply obsessed with that song "I Will Follow You Into the Dark" by Death Cab for Cutie? Do you know that song? You
I
don't know
don't.
it. Wow. Wow.
I don't, but
Wow.
I mean, I know
Wow.
Death Cab for Cutie, but I was too late for that train.
Well,
So
see, this is another example of me being very, very hip.
you are. It's a little creepy. I'm a little creeped out.
So, no, but that song has this very similar, it's this kind of incredibly romantic, almost overly romantic sentiment
Well,
of
it's like
like basically dying to like if you were going to get old together and if you die first then you know what I mean. It's this whole thing and it's really both sad and kind of goth but really pretty, that I feel like there's a lot of that in here. And so if you're a younger person who maybe knows that song and thought like, wow, that was what I made out with my girlfriend at my prom,
you hear that
to
horn
that
going
song.
by.
No, there was a horn going by.
Oh, okay, sorry. Like there was somebody driving up our street honking their horn. Like
Wow.
anyway, yeah.
Well, they must be fans. They must know
It's
that we're
getting wild. Yeah,
recording.
they were like,
Yeah.
oh, they're recording the AMC. They're recording the one about action. I'm like, I love outside this bar. Yeah.
All right. So anyway, beautiful lyrics. I definitely
Hmm.
think that if you like JW, if you really are unfamiliar with this band, I don't think that starting with this song specifically is a bad place to start, because this is really an all-time American Music Club classic. It is such an interesting way to start an album. The lyrics are beautiful. It is a blueprint for slowcore in a lot of ways. It's just it, this
Yeah.
song may be a 10. I mean,
It
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 may be a
sets the
perfect song.
table. Yeah, it sets the
Absolutely.
table. Like for this is the song that, I made, I am positive, more than one American Music Club mixtape back in the
Oh my
day,
God.
for people that I was trying to turn on to American Music Club or whatever. This was
Yeah.
always track one. This was the
Yeah.
one.
Yeah.
Um,
No, there's no doubt. So, but I want to transition into the music itself. So obviously, this is an amazingly atmospheric song. But coming out, being a band, coming out of having recorded The Restless Stranger, the fact that the instrumentation of this song is strings, right? Like this is like strings and guitar and like a Hammond or something, I think. But it's just insane how moody and atmospheric and kind of like orchestral. It's such an amazing choice to start this album. And what I wrote in here, one of my notes in here was, can you imagine hearing the playback of this song for the first time after, like, you know what I mean? After having done like The Restless Stranger, which is an album with its merits and stuff. This is like an amazing leap forward. This is a song that holds up perfectly today. They must have heard this and thought, fuck, I can't believe we did that.
Yeah, considering its origins, like going back and listening to that original demo, which is so vastly different, and like they reined it in to this
Yeah,
perfect little opening number that, to this day, I still am like, this is the best introduction to AMC. No drums on it, you
yeah,
know.
at all.
It's just, it sets the table. It's the cinematic like opening to the movie. The one thing I wanted to say is it's got a prominent cello playing
Very
on it.
prominent. Yes.
And
Yep.
did my research, and the cello apparently was played by a woman named Carla Fabrizio. I'm sorry if I'm, but anyway, the interesting thing that I found out about her, which may be exciting to you or it may not, is that
Yeah.
she went on to be a member of the band Tarnation on their
Oh my
first.
gosh.
Yes, on their first
Wow.
album, she was one of the, I think they were a four-piece on that album. She's in
Yeah.
that band, and they're a San Francisco band. And
Yeah.
so, again, we're like, they're just these little connections, like to
Yeah.
kind of other bands on the scene there,
Yeah. Tarnation, a 4AD band, right?
Yeah.
And it what I would consider an early alt country band, right? I
Yeah, they
mean,
they definitely they had like but I mean they had their own spin on it just because,
it's a
they're
little more
Paula.
atmospheric, but
Yeah, Paula Fraser's voice kind of took it to a different place, more of a Patsy Cline country kind of
yeah,
place.
yeah.
Um,
But
but
but I
but anyway, so this woman who was in Tarnation played the cello, I assume, on this song,
yeah, that's actually a great little bit of trivia. So I think probably the instrumentation, we talked about it as well. My real question is, like, where did this band come from? The choices that they made musically are just so different than anything that they
Mhm,
did on The Restless Stranger. They have these like very tasteful piano arpeggios in the chorus, very simple acoustic guitar, the
mhm.
strings. It's just like tasteful in a way that, like, again, I'm not trying to sound too dismissive of The Restless Stranger, but I wouldn't call it a tasteful album in terms of instrumentation. You know what I mean? There weren't
Yeah.
interesting instrumentation choices on it. It was just kind of a rock album with pretty standard rock instrumentation. And this is just not that at all.
Yeah, I think it felt like on Restless Stranger, they were trying to show what the band could do and what the producer could
Yeah.
do. And they were trying to demonstrate all of that on this album. And this is almost like the opposite, where it's like they're restraining themselves and they're like, we want to make an artistic statement. We want to open with a mood,
Yeah.
And that's why, like on Restless Stranger, the beginning of side two, Goodbye Reprise, like the opening 2 minutes of that, to me, like it's like they were kind of like trying to kind of do that sort of thing too, where it's like
Yeah.
it feels like the beginning of like some kind of cinematic thing. I always think it's like of a
Yeah.
movie, and I feel like Big Night like nailed it.
Yeah, yeah. I think the last thing that I'm gonna say about the music of this one, that really strikes me is Eitzel's vocals on this song really find a different gear that is so much better and so powerful compared to anything that you hear on The Restless Stranger. He finds on The Restless Stranger, he has kind of two gears, right? He has the punk rager and the deep kind of crooner, right? And he keeps the that croonery thing throughout. I call it, I don't want to make it sound too weird, but he has this kind of lower kind of baritone voice, and he it's a powerful voice, right? But it has this um the only way I know how to describe it is croonery thing. Um in this, he finds this like whisper, this very weak, breathy whisper that you hear in this song, and that finding that gear makes the other two gears so much more interesting, right? It really gives him this range, this kind of like yeah, just a emotive range in his vocal performance that I think is stunning. It's like this, you hear him on this song, you're just like, fuck, he is like a beautiful singer in a way that I don't think you would say off of The Restless Stranger.
Yeah, this reaches like a meditative kind of like tone. He's like weary,
Yeah. Yes.
but sort of like it is a little bit dreamlike, and yeah, I would agree. There aren't too many examples of that kind of thing on Restless Stranger, and it is quite a contrast to what comes later on the album at times.
That's right. So is there anything else? I mean, we have raved about this song, Big Night.
Yeah. The
But
only
is
other
there
thing I want to say is like, so I saw American Music Club play at Stashes in 1991 when I was a freshman in college. And I found out that day, I didn't have a car, so I couldn't go to the show. Like, I couldn't drive myself to the show. I found out the day of the show that they were playing at Stashes, and I was so bummed out. I was so like, just like, oh, there's no way I'm going to be able to go see the show or whatever. And I managed to convince a couple of friends who had a car to
yeah.
drive me into Columbus to go to this club to like go see this band they had never heard of.
Yeah.
And at that show, I remember I yelled out, like I was waiting like the whole show. I was sitting like, waiting, and a small show in a bar, so it's like between songs, it would get quiet enough that you could be like, play whatever.
Yeah.
And I yelled out this song. I was like, Big Night. And Eitzel looked over in my direction and he said, yeah, kind of like this one. And I was just like, I don't know how to respond. It was just like that was the end of the conversation.
And
Um,
they didn't play it though.
Honest to God, I can't remember if they played it then. Like if they did, it would have had to be different, because they
Yeah.
didn't have a cello, so
Yeah.
I don't
Yeah.
remember if they did or not, but I want to say they didn't.
Yeah.
I wasn't disappointed. I was psyched, but I only have like certain flashes of memory from that show, but I remember this was the song that I chose to yell.
All right. With that anecdote, why don't we move on to track two, side A, Engine? It is Outside This Bar, JW. 3 minutes and 4 seconds, music by Eitzel, lyrics by Eitzel. Let's give it a listen. Okay, JW. Outside This Bar, let's talk about the lyrics. This is the classic Eitzlerian lyrical trope here. Why don't you start us off?
So a few years after this album, Eitzel releases, there's a solo album, Mark Eitzel Songs of Love Live, which is a live recording of him doing a solo acoustic performance. In the liner notes for that CD, because he does a version of Outside This Bar on that album, he writes about Outside This Bar. Again, more sweet memories of Columbus, Ohio, about two or three things at once, but mostly the turned over the rock feeling of emerging from a bar, Andy's Pub, now a t-shirt shrine to the numb god of dull consumerism, after drinking 3 or 6 Long Island iced teas onto an empty North High Street at 3 on a Sunday afternoon in 100 degrees of heat. It is at moments like these that the maggots begin to take grip of your body.
Yes.
That's what he wrote about outside this bar. To
Yeah.
me,
Yeah. Yeah.
for me, this song was this was almost like the band grabbing for the brass ring. Like this song has such commercial potential.
Yeah.
Just in terms of it sounds like to me like I get the Springsteen
Yeah.
vibe. Like you could
Yeah.
hear Bruce Springsteen singing this song, and I think it's kind of funny because as I was listening to it, a phrase popped into my head, which was beer commercial guitar rock. And I was
You know
like,
what?
why? And the reason that I thought of that phrase was because it was, I think that phrase or some variation of it was made famous by Mark Kozelek.
Yeah.
Is that how you pronounce his name? Kozelek?
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but Mark Kozlek from Red House Painters / Sun Kill Moon.
Yeah, and you probably remember like 10 years ago or so, he got into kind of like a beef with that band.
I can't imagine. I've never heard of a beef, a Mark Kozlek beef.
You didn't hear
That
about this beef with
no, I've never heard about a. I don't
this
think I've
was
ever heard about any indie band having a beef with anybody. But go
this
ahead. I
was
want to hear about it
covered
now.
this was covered. Okay, War on Drugs. Do you know the band The War on Drugs, or you've
I've
heard of
I've
them?
I've heard of the band The War on Drugs. Yes.
Anyway, Kozilek got into like a beef. It was like a whole thing. Like go
Yeah.
look it up. I can't
Really.
condense it. Yeah,
Were there
and
like were there like diss tracks, as they say,
yes,
in
yes,
the
there were.
No.
Yes, at least
No.
From Kozilek, there were diss tracks, and he described War on Drugs as something like dumb beer commercial rock or something like that. And so that phrase popped into my head while I was listening to Outside This Bar because I was like,
Yeah.
this sounds like a bar band just giving it
Fine.
their all.
Yeah. Yeah.
Give
You know,
and like
it's interesting that you say that about this song, and I wouldn't have described it that way. I wouldn't have thought of it that way. But as it happens, just yesterday, I was driving my car here with my wife, and we decided to listen to some Sirius XM, which we haven't listened to in a very long time. And I discovered that they have a channel that I've now decided I love called Red, White, and Booze, which is like it's all like country bar rock. You know what I mean?
like every song is an alcohol like metaphor or whatever.
Yeah, people. I don't know if you've ever heard that country song. People say I've got a drinking problem. I got no
Oh yeah,
problem
yeah.
drinking. Yeah, yeah, all that kind of stuff.
We're
Wow.
just out at the back of the dirt road drinking our beer and talking about girls and going. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I think that's not that isn't an angle on this I expected you to take.
Oh, that's just what struck me when I
Yeah,
was listening to it. Like this, for as artificial as The Restless Stranger could sound, the
yeah,
production of it, this
yeah,
song sounds like visceral and real. Like you're there in the bar and this band is just giving it its all. And the singer is singing about this bar. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
he's telling you outside this bar there's no one alive,
yeah,
like and
yeah,
and of course it's the thing that's great about the lyrics of this song is that on the one hand it's sort of celebratory of like you're
yeah,
drinking buddies and you're hanging out and you're hanging out at this bar and like but it also has glimpses of this kind of like, sadness, this kind of
Yeah,
like, um, I don't know, just, something tragic about this
yeah,
scenario. And
yeah, yeah,
it has them both at once, and I think that
yeah.
that's a beautiful, thing to pull off.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there is no question that this is classically in the Eitzlerian kind of Bukowski oeuvre. Okay, this is the beautiful.
Oh,
This is the beautiful losers in the bar. This is Eitzel's meat and potatoes. Okay, um, executed well, but not, in my opinion, particularly notable lyrics relative to some of the other lyrics on this album. Two
the
things I'd
one
mention. Two things I'd mention about the lyrics here. Once again, the chorus lyrics very very memorable. It's really notable how much how much more traditionally crafted the songs on this album are than on The
mm,
Restless Stranger. These are
Women.
really pop structured songs, and the lyrics really support the choruses here. It's just like a very memorable chorus lyric and a very easy to sing along with chorus kind of a song. So pretty straightforward. And then the last thing I'd say about the lyrics here is there is some rage in these lyrics, but what I like about this is he does not deliver the vocals with like any rage, a tremendous amount of rage, right? He doesn't go into that kind of performance art punk mode. Really is
Not I
much
mean, not
more.
entirely, but he does, like when he
He
gets
does his
to
stuff.
he goes up, like towards
Yeah,
the end, in the end we'll watch the pattern as it begins to swell. Like when he gets to
yeah,
that, like
yeah,
he swells, but then
yeah,
it's like back into the smooth kind of chorus. And
yeah.
but the interesting thing is I think the way that he leaves the song off, like that last little couplet, like everything kind of comes down to like,
Yeah.
back to quiet. And he says, we'll turn the quiet night into silence. Together we'll turn this love into
Into,
violence. And
yeah.
and that's the
Yeah.
last thing you hear. And it's just this unsettling kind of like, whoa, like
No,
I
but I
don't know,
mean,
great
to
way to end the song.
great way to end the song and to transition more into the music from the lyrics here. In the last episode, or actually the episode where we discussed The Restless Stranger, and of course all of the many fans from season one, you guys all know how much I dislike a fade out. This is the kind of song that the lazy approach here would be to just do that outside this bar and just keep on jamming that and then just fade that out.
Yeah.
They don't do that. They do, JW, exactly what you said. It gets this unsettling kind of quietness at the end with that disconcerting lyric, and it turns the song into something so much more meaningful and thought provoking than if it were just kind of like, outside this bar, two chords until, we fade out, maybe some big drum fills or whatever. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? It's just like, it's
Totally.
so much better. It's a perfect example of if you
But
don't choose to fade out, you can really do something special.
there are two, like that is one instance in which I would say they sort of undermined themselves a little bit, maybe in the commercial market. Like, because you wouldn't hear a top 40
Agreed.
song end on that note. And number
Agreed.
two, he drops an F bomb um, early in the song. And it's
I
hard to
don't.
remember. It's hard to remember now. But in
Yeah.
1987, dropping an
Yeah.
F bomb in the middle of a verse of a song like that was like, okay, like radio's not going to play you now.
Yeah.
Like
That's right.
this was their most radio friendly, like, catchy, like this could be a pop hit
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
song, but they
Yeah.
undermined it by leaving it, putting that F bomb in the
Yeah.
verse, like,
Yeah.
and I wonder
Yeah.
if they, if there were discussions
Yeah.
about that at the time.
Yeah, that's interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but it's an undeniably kind of pop rocker. It is,
Mm,
other than a few things, it's a pretty overall kind of a straight ahead rock song.
Oh
Really
yeah.
simple, traditional structure, basic production. There's not a lot to it. The one thing that struck me about the instrumentation, and I made a note of this, Voodie's guitar in the chorus of this song is this glimpse of what I think is interesting about Voodie as a guitar player. And we've talked about it a little bit already, and I think we'll probably talk about it more. But I had mentioned I kind of think about him in the same category as like a Johnny Greenwood from Radiohead. Does a
He's
lot of interesting
yeah.
off-kiltery,
He,
soundscapey,
he's
atmospheric.
painting soundscapes. Yes.
Yeah. And he does a bit of that in the chorus of this song, which is really, I think, the only thing in this song from an instrumentation perspective that kind of sets it apart from exactly what you were saying, which is this like, you know, basically bar rock song.
Yeah. Well, yeah, I mean, it's true. Like that is something that you wouldn't have heard on a Springsteen or a John Mellencamp version
That's
of this
right.
song. Like you could
That's right.
hear Springsteen and Mellencamp performing this song,
Yeah,
but you could not hear them performing Big Night. Maybe
that's right.
Springsteen. But
Yeah, yeah,
you know what I mean? Like there was something too
yeah,
dark,
yeah,
about, and ending the song on, together we'll turn this love into violence. Like,
yeah,
ooh,
yeah,
like that's
yeah,
kind of a
yeah,
heavy thing to end on.
yeah. Well, listen, great discussion of Outside This Bar. Are we ready to move along to track 3 on side A?
Yes.
We're ready. All right. So, At Your Mercy is the third track on this album. And
At my mercy.
at,
At
at, at,
my
at your mercy? Is it your
at
mercy or is it
no,
my?
it's
No, whose mercy?
the
Um,
title is At My Mercy.
okay. At Your Mercy, Joel. At Your Mercy.
No.
One.
Don't mis don't mislead our see? You see it? I'm holding it up to the
Okay.
camera.
Okay.
Okay.
At my mercy. It's at my mercy. It's at my mercy. 4 minutes, 11 seconds. Lyrics by Eitzel, music by Eitzel. Why don't we just take it for a test drive? All right. J. William Hall.
Mhm.
Lyrically, I had a tough time really getting inside of these lyrics. I can talk about what they evoke for me, but I'm wondering if you have any kind of consistent thoughts about these, or kind of you've formulated some kind of a perspective on this song.
Yeah, like I think it's definitely romantic in
Yeah,
in some way, shape, or form. Like it feels like, he's singing to a love,
yeah,
unrequited or otherwise.
yeah,
But I like how, like, again, there's this mix of really sort of like simple, straightforward observational things and then something super poetic. So like the first line, he's like, I hold your dress is blue. Like
yeah,
it couldn't be more just simple observational. And then it's, I'm a coin that fell into the sea. Like,
yeah,
which is so poetic and evocative and just,
yeah,
and I feel like that's part of the Eitzel magic, It's like he
yeah.
weaves those sort of things together and just creates this kind of tapestry of, so for this song, I mean, to me it's some kind of romantic or some, something to do with love.
Yeah, well, it was very difficult for me to come up with a clear perspective on what he was talking about here. There are definitely characters that he describes, probably a guy, and the way I interpret it was a guy and a girl who is a guy who goes into a bar and a girl who's always at the bar. There's some kind of a dialogue between them. But there's a shifting point of view in this throughout these lyrics that I find kind of disconcerting, right? He's kind of a narrator in certain parts, and then he's like a protagonist in certain parts. I just couldn't quite wrap my head around what was going on in these, except there is definitely this rage that we talked about a little bit. This is the first song on the album where I really feel like that kind of real ragefulness, not in the performance, but in the lyric comes through. I really do feel like there's that chorus, the name of the song, for example, "At My Mercy." Now you're finally at my mercy. I feel like there's a resentfulness in that somehow. That's the way I took it, but I didn't. I had a tough time with these lyrics. It's not that I dislike these lyrics, but I don't feel like I'm really projecting here, but I think that as you go through Eitzel's career, as he progresses in his career, his lyrics tend to have, later on in his career, they feel as though he's iterated on the lyrics quite a bit more, right? Like none of them are first draft. None of them are 10th draft, right? He's really kind of shaped the stone and polished the diamond.
Yeah.
These don't feel that way to me. These feel a little bit more stream of consciousness, a little bit more performance arty. There's a feeling that comes across, but it isn't really the lyrics for me basically just feel inaccessible in a way that I don't personally love.
I would argue
Okay.
to play devil's advocate, but not
Okay.
entirely, because I'm
Mhm.
advocating for myself a little bit as well. Sometimes
Okay.
I like lyrics that are a little more open-ended, a little more kind of
Sure.
like poetic. They sort of give you a framework, but they don't get into the specifics, and then you can kind of fill those gaps in yourself, and then it
Sure.
becomes meaningful, to you in a way maybe that's specific to your life in some way or whatever. You think,
Yeah.
oh, you know and so sometimes when lyrics are really polished to the point where it's like, they were singing about this specific thing, and
Yeah.
like that, it can be awesome and impressive and whatever, but it doesn't necessarily, you know relate to your, you don't take
Mm.
ownership of some interpretation of it, you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
I
so
do know what you mean.
I think like this song, like the lyrics here, and it feels like it's something like, um I don't know, like maybe like, you think you're in love with somebody, and then once you're together, it's not what you thought it would be, or something like that.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it would be hilarious probably for Eitzel to be like, "What are these two idiots like talking about?" Like trying to
Yeah.
interpret this song. But
I,
yeah, it's open ended for sure.
it's more of an impressionist painting
Right.
than it is a well executed good painting.
Well, good is a judgment, but to me, it's evocative, and I really, I think part of what's evocative about this song is the music. Like,
Yeah.
you can
Yeah.
tell they really
Hey, Jay
spent
Williams,
time. Yeah.
that was a great transition into the music, by the way. I just wanted to point that out. That
Hey,
was like an incredible
hey, man.
segue.
Hey, man, I'm on episode 5 or 6 at this point. I'm like a well-oiled machine. You know what I'm talking about?
I like it. Okay.
Um, so, you know, the music, you can tell that they really spent time, not just on this song, but on every song on this album, like arranging these songs, like thinking
Yeah.
through how they were going to build these things up instrument by instrument, and like make the song kind of rise and fall. And I feel
Yep.
like this song has so many really nice like build ups, and then rises, and then drops out, and then kind of
Yeah.
starts again, and it just does it over and over again. And I think like the chorus with the back and forth with the backing vocals, like we haven't talked about backing vocals very much with AMC, and this song and Outside This Bar as well have great backing vocals, like super
Yeah.
tight, hitting like, precise harmony kind of thing. And, and I think it enhances the whole thing. This is a great band track,
Yeah. Yeah, I have similar notes on the music myself. This is a very straightforward rock song again. But it is an incredibly well-crafted pop rock song. If
Mhm.
you buy into this thing that like there is a real craft to like this kind of making the verse chorus, kind of pop structure, this is another song that just totally nails that. And the note for me is like 3 songs into this album, where did this Mark Eitzel come from? It's like in the 8 months between The Restless Stranger and Engine, he perfected the ability to write a pop song. Every single song so far on this album has there. I don't want to make it sound like it's like the Cardigans or something, right? I think of the
Right.
Cardigans as this band that really makes like pop, 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 right?
Yeah.
It's not like that. The tone, the kind of colors of the music are not necessarily completely pop, but the songwriting and the melodies are just totally accessible and really, really well done, just beautiful. And this song is a really, really great example. It reminds me the flow of this album on re-listen reminds me in terms of the tracking so far reminds me of the album. I'm going to reference an album that, again, even less people probably are familiar with than the American Music Club fans that are listening to this. Um, Idaho's Three Sheets to the Wind. It opens and then it has these two rockers, right? Like track 2 and track 3. It was like Pomegranate Bleeding, I think, was the
Mhm.
second track. And
Yeah,
I remember
big, yeah, pop
yeah, but they
pop
were like
rock track.
to- total pop rock tracks on on an album that's much more slowcore atmospheric than that. And it's interesting how those two kind of rock tracks in track 2 and track 3 really hit you after that opener, that moody opener.
I think that's sort of like, there are obviously like a bunch of different ways you can structure an album, that you
Yeah,
can arrange the tracks.
yeah,
And, there's one school of thought that like you open with your strongest, most pop accessible,
yeah,
danceable, whatever, like you got to open with that one. And then there's a school of thought of like, no, you open with like the mysterious track and you set the mood, and then
yeah,
like you hit them with
yeah,
track two, and I feel like Engine is definitely, that's what they did. They opened with the mood, and then they, did the big pop whatever track
yeah,
two, and
yeah,
track three does continue that momentum, but it's also, it slows down at times too. Like, they
yeah,
start to kind of introduce it's like a mix
yeah,
of like the big and the small, and then the big and the
yeah,
small,
yeah,
and the one thing that so I started like, I was looking at the liner notes of the album as I was listening to these, and I was interested in like who played drums on which track. And
yeah.
so I noticed that the name of the guy who played drums on this track was Dave Sheff. And so, clicked around and found like, oh, he was in this seminal San Francisco band from the 80s called Translator. And
Uh,
they had and oh damn it, I left it downstairs, but I've got on vinyl this Translator best of, um
really?
yeah, like because they had this one song that I loved called Everywhere That I'm Not, which was like their big hit. And it
Yeah,
was just like a college rock, kind of level hit. It wasn't top 40.
yeah,
But
yeah,
he was the drummer for Translator, which was like a big band in San Francisco, like early 80s. And
yeah, yeah,
so clearly by this point, he was doing session work
yeah,
or whatever. And he plays on a bunch of songs on this album. And I mean, the drums are, I think, phenomenal throughout this album, regardless of who's playing them. But definitely, like as I was listening to "At My Mercy" and just the way he um, subtly builds the song,
yeah,
like
yeah,
through the drum work, like
yeah,
it's cool to, I don't know. It's cool, man.
Yeah.
It's real cool.
I think that no, I think the drumming on this album, you call the drumming on this album is really good across the board, actually. It's better than I remember. I don't remember listening to America as somebody who plays drums. Uh,
Hmm.
You know, I I don't remember the drumming being as good as it is on this album, honestly. I
Well,
never really think of American Music Club as a band that like the drums are particularly notable.
mhm.
But I really do. I feel like they were really, better than I mean it, he wasn't they're not putting on a technical clinic here. This isn't Neil Peart playing, 2112 Prelude, but
Yeah,
it's
they're not
it's
they're
it's
not
pretty good.
showy. Yeah, they're
No,
not
they're not showy,
showboaty, but
but good.
they're really good,
Good.
and they really enhance the ebb and flow of these songs.
I feel like there was a little bit of you calling Neil Peart showboaty right there. Is that what I just caught? Did I just catch
Well,
that? Yeah.
I showboaty is no, that's not the right term because that implies that he's like showing off or whatever. But
Yeah.
Rush, it's like it's a power trio, and so each member of the band has their moments where like they're out
Yeah.
front, kind of, you know, showing off basically because they were all so technically like amazing.
They're
I
showboating.
don't.
They're just showboating,
Dave
guys.
Dave Sheff of Translator, while an accomplished and clearly very solid drummer, was not as, I don't
Yeah.
know,
Showboaty.
showboaty. There weren't moments where the rest of AMC was like, okay, and everybody drop out here.
Showboaty.
Chef, do a solo, like.
All right. That's perfect. So is there more that we want to talk about in this song, or do you want to move on to Gary's song?
Um, I I will just say that one note I had about this was the ending of this song I thought was really um good too because it sort of it's like this little coda where he goes,
Yeah.
that's all, and then like can they drop out, but they kind of like finish it off.
Yeah.
And it's also very like it sets this mood, and it also introduces this kind of element of beauty, like
Yeah.
to their sound. And so it's
Yeah.
like already after three songs they're taking you places, like
Yeah.
emotionally.
Yeah, it's really just again another great example of what you can do if you don't, pussy out with the old fade out.
This is true.
Um,
Yeah,
um,
they don't fade it. Yeah. It's
yeah.
almost like a live fade, but not quite.
All right.
Gary
So
Gary song. Yeah.
track four, Gary song. This is one of the most interesting songs on the album, I'm gonna say. But let's give it a listen. It's only 2 minutes and 57 seconds. Words and music by Mark Eitzel. Let's give it a listen. Okay. This is the first really kind of confounding song on the album, I'm going to say. I want to get into the why I think it's confounding overall, but let's talk about the lyrics because I think the lyrics in their own way I think are confounding. Um internally confounding. So there are some like undeniably goofy lyrics in this song, almost, comedy lyrics where Eitzel is really singing from the perspective of a character. Again, all right, so the very basics. This is classic Eitzlerian fare. Guys in a bar, right? Gary is the friend of the narrator. They're in a bar. They're talking about their existence in this bar. There are some undeniably kind of goofy lyrics. I think I just came in my pants. Hey, darling, do you want to dance? Right? Like,
Right.
kind of funny, off kilter, clearly kind of making fun of the person that the character that he's kind of singing from. but there are also some really like kind of serious, substantive, and sad sections in this.
Right. So again, I've got he wrote in the liner notes of this live album he did a little later. He says, "There's something about Columbus, Ohio that makes one want to drink beer. I did a lot of that on the front porch with a friend, though the song is, of course, more about me than him. It's always easier to place blame. You never have to admit why you are the only one in the world that can see a particular problem in someone else. When creatures stop evolving, and they over specialize. His name is Frank, not Gary." So that's what
Oh,
Eitzel
yeah,
wrote about the song. So,
yeah,
clearly this is of the same sort of general theme or whatever as outside this bar. It's like, again, it's like drinking with a friend,
yeah,
seeing that this is harmful,
yeah,
and at the same time, like there's love there, like you
yeah.
can sense the camaraderie.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a I mean, it really we have to talk about the musical take on it. But the like lyrically, it's like despite the musical take on it, or maybe because of the musical take on it, Eitzel channels this kind of drunks eternally at a bar feeling. This song, the lyric delivery, and the music feels somehow like drunk guys at a certain kind of bar. And I love that about this song. It's just so kind of internally consistent, but it has this, despite that kind of joyful goofiness that's in a lot of the lyrics and really all of the music, there is an undeniable sadness to this song, right? And you were kind of hitting on it, and he hits on it in the lyrics as well. So I really love that about this song. I love that it kind of exists in multiple planes simultaneously,
Mhm.
um, and that it kind of unapologetically does that. But if you want to move on to I don't know if you have more to say about the lyrics, but I want to connect
Well,
this to the music as well.
yeah, I mean, I guess I'm transitioning to the music really because the song that I think this sort of fills the same niche as in a way from Restless Stranger is Heavenly Smile. You remember Heavenly Smile on Restless
Yeah,
Stranger? They decided to go with this like super folky instrumentation kind of thing, and in the context of that album, it felt like more out of place. So this song is sort of like their sort of nod to their kind of folk country kind of roots. But a couple of things. One is that like they do it it's like a waltz. It's in waltz
yeah,
time,
it is in
and
Lost Time, yeah.
that's a little different. And they do like really spot on 3-part harmonies,
Yeah,
when they're doing the later verses and stuff. And the song is just so goofy, like lyrically, but it does have that sadness. If you drink too much, you'll drown. And the
yeah,
shame of my life is watching you drown. You
yeah.
know,
I
so
mean,
it's kind of a
heavy.
beautiful, situation. It's like you're with your drinking buddy who, you love dearly, but you recognize like this is a problem, like, how much we're
Yeah,
drinking
yeah.
and, whatever.
It's I mean, getting back to this kind of like country thing, it is a country. This is not, it is impossible to say that this is like a country twinged song. This is a full-on country waltz, right?
Oh
And
yeah.
there are not a lot of like even modern country, like real country, not even like kind of alternative country, like real country musicians that will do kind of a full-on waltz. This is like classic Willie Nelson style country waltz. The only song that I could think of that does this and pulls it off well, that kind of, is front of mind for me and maybe relevant for American music clubs, music club fans, is Elliott Smith's Waltz Number Two, XO, which is off of the album XO. Beautiful, beautiful song, but again, full on waltz time song, and it is a very difficult type of a song to pull off like credibly, I think, unless you're again kind of like Willie Nelson, right? It's just it's a very difficult type of song to pull off, and I think they pull it off here. It's confounding though, because it goes so deeply into that country waltz and this kind of intentionally drunken sounding feel that the obvious like analogs for me were, well, it's a little bit like a throwaway like $1 Million Song or Art of Love on here. But it's not. It isn't a throwaway because it's much too polished. The lyrics are much too polished. The instrumental approach is, I think, much too polished. It but it's I really struggle with this song because it's a song that I love across their catalog, but it does feel to me somehow out of place on the album.
Yeah, I know what you mean. Because my when I did my revised Jay Williams revised Restless Stranger track list, and I was like, Heavenly Smile, the
Yeah,
country, the Grand Old Opry version is off,
yeah.
and this evokes sort of music, I guess, a little bit more. But I don't know. There's something lyrically about this one, and you know. It fits like for me I know what you mean about like thinking it's the odd song out kind of thing. But maybe because it's thematically, the
Yeah,
drinking song, like something about it like really fits. And I like that it sounds like the whole band kind of contributing and playing, like singing on it and stuff. And it's definitely a curveball, you
it
know,
is
um,
it's a major curveball.
which was kind of a little bit of the weakness of Restless Stranger, was that there were too many curveballs on that album.
Yeah.
And this is kind of the first one on this album. But I don't know, I guess I just like the song better.
Yeah, that's kind of where I come down on it. The way I kind of like, I never really had internal resolution on this, but I think where I sit here is I feel like this song does not belong on the album, but it is such a good song overall that I'm not angry it's included, if that makes sense, right? But I do feel like this is kind of more of a B-side than it is an album track, but it's a great B-side. I mean, we're going to talk about this when we get deeper into the catalog, but another song like it's not like that. Another B-side that they have that I think is just an absolutely killer track that should be on an album is Chanel Number 5.
Oh, see, I thought you were going to say a different one that I was going to name.
Oh, okay.
um The Right Thing.
Oh, The
From
Right Thing. Yeah.
Yeah, which has kind of like, it has sort of a honky tonk kind of.
Yeah, no, The Right Thing actually is more similar to Gary's song. Not they have some B-sides though that I think are as good as album tracks. This is definitely as good in some way as any of the songs on this album, better than some songs on this album, but I still am just going to say that I think that it doesn't really fit on the album.
All right.
So, yeah,
So
but I
are
do.
you going to give your revised track list?
No, I'm not. I'm not actually, because I didn't do one. But I will say that yeah, this was kind of the most confounding song for me in backtracking this album. I will say though, you've brought up the first Eitzel solo album, which I do think we're going to cover on the podcast, Songs of Love Live. Um,
Sure.
it is definitely worth listening to the Songs of Love Live version of Gary's song. It's a
Yeah.
very different feel and approach, and it may in fact be part of the reason that I like this version of the song as well as I do, because I really, really love the version of Gary's song on the Songs of Love Live album.
Indeed.
All
Yeah,
right,
yeah.
so should we move on to the last track on side A of Engine,
Yes.
Nightwatchman? All right, we're gonna do it. We're gonna move right on to Nightwatchman. It is 4 minutes and 49 seconds, the longest track so far on side A. Music and lyrics by Eitzel. Let's go. Okay, what a chorus lyric, Jay William. Eitzel is absolutely on fire with the chorus lyrics on this album. They're just memorable and beautiful. The chorus lyric in here is so simple, but so evocative and memorable. The night watchman, he's asleep. It's just great.
Yeah. This whole song, like as a closing song for side one, is just fantastic. I mean,
Yeah.
this song is cinematic. This song is evocative. It ties just kind of the mood of the whole first side. It like brings it kind of around again, it's that big night kind of,
Yeah.
feel. The band, like the way that they structure this song and they build it, just
Yeah.
like incrementally, like throughout the song until like, and it's never like rip roar and like screaming or whatever, but it builds to this like amazing kind of crescendo, like great instrumentation, great tasteful
Yeah.
guitar solo like towards the end. Um, you
It's
know, the drums, Dave Sheff again was drumming on this. Just the feel of them is so good. Like once it kind of like gets in there,
I think if you just listen to the acoustic guitar playing on this song, you realize it really could have had a much more straight ahead rock feel. And Voody and Pearson really define in their playing a much different, much more interesting, much more atmospheric feel in here that I just don't think is like obvious from the way Eitzel's playing. I'm assuming it's Eitzel playing the acoustic. It may not be him, but you're kind
Yeah,
of
I think yeah, it sounded like he's kind of keeping the rhythm, with that
yeah.
acoustic part, and then Voody's kind of doing all the electric stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, but I really feel like this is another one of these places where you're like, oh God, Voody and Pearson really are doing much more in this band than just backing up Eitzel, right? I mean, they are, or at least that's kind of what I take from a song like this. They really shape it into something a little more unusual and much more interesting. And then to talk about the drums, I actually had a note on the drums on this one as well. Um, Much more interesting than I remember them being from kind of the last time I listened to this album. Busier drumming than I remember
Mhm.
on many
L-
AMC
Like
albums.
the ghost notes, is like boom, pop, ba-doom, pop,
And
ba-doom,
it
boom, pop.
And it really, if you listen to this drum part and you listen to the first two Red House Painters albums,
Mm,
very similar approach to how the drums are being played. It
okay.
it really struck me as like, wow, I mean, obviously it predates Red House Painters, but like very similar kind of drumming approach.
Um, a reappearance, second appearance of Carla Fabrioso and the cello, which I think is
Yeah.
part of what create. This is why it sounds similar to Big Night, I guess. Like there's that cello that comes in. Um,
It's interesting. I think one of the things to bring up Carla Fabrioso, Carla
Fabrioso,
Fabrioso. I think I think that people love it when I do my Italian accent.
right?
um, so so one of the things that strikes me about the inclusion of the child and how nice it is, it really is. It's like they're trying to find another instrument to kind of fill in the atmospheric like vibe of the band as they move away from keyboards, but have yet to arrive at Bruce Caffin's pedal steel, right?
Yeah, that's actually a good point because this is sort of that transitional period where the keyboards are kind of gone, but the pedal
Yeah,
steel has not entered yet. And so,
yeah,
yeah, like the cello, yeah, that kind of fills that role.
yeah, yeah.
And I for one love it. Like
I love
I
it
think it
too.
works so well.
Yeah.
Voody has some really great guitar moments on this song in the second verse where like everything kind of drops back again and Eitzel starts with is that the same line you gave me before, and
Yeah,
Voody's just going wow, like
yeah,
distant, like wow. He's just like
yeah.
hitting these kind of like dissonant sort of like touches in the background, and I thought to myself, Ready? Are you ready to go on another wild tangent?
Yeah, yeah.
I thought to myself, this reminds me of early like Chris Isaac albums. and
Oh,
and
okay.
so
Yeah,
I'm like, I think, did we talk about this on the
we
where,
did. We did.
he was in San Francisco. So anyway, I went Googling around or whatever, and I went down a rabbit hole on Chris Isaac's original guitar player, James Calvin Wilsey, who
Yeah,
played on the first however many Isaac albums, and like, like Wicked Game, like,
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah,
feel like Voodie has touches of that.
yeah,
Not just on this album, but like later on, where he's sort of like getting that same kind of like vibe, that kind of like dreamy Americana,
yeah,
thing. So anyway, like this song is a good example of that.
yeah, yeah. No, it is a great album side closer. And so, Jay William, with that, we are finished with side A of Engine. Can you believe it? We're already done. We only have a few more tracks to go before we move deeper into the catalog, before we backtrack again. But before we
Well,
do that,
right. When we get to the end of the album, then we're just going to go back and start at the beginning again and talk about it again.
no, what we're going to do is we're going to do a backtracking of the backtracking episode of the backtracking of the album. So we'll go
Ah,
track by track, commenting on our comments on the
mm.
album. What do you think about that?
And once we're done with that, we can go back again and we'll back
All right.
anyway.
So listen, thank you all for staying tuned to another episode of Backtracking. As always, we are coming to you on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever podcast application you prefer. And of course, as always, broadcasting live 91.1 FM in Haleakala, Hawaii. You can always catch us there. Please send us an email. backtrackingrocksrox@gmail.com. Instagram @backtrackingrocksrox. Twitter @backtrackingrocksrox. And of course, Reddit. Our username is backtrackingrocks. You will find us lingering around in not only the American Music Club subreddit, but the slowcore subreddit, the Rush subreddit, all the subreddits that you might choose to go into. Who knows? We may even join some, hot pepper subreddits or whatever kind of tickles our funny bone.
David and David, David and David subreddit.
David. We're going to start the David and David subreddit, and so please join us in there. Thank you again for listening. Please, if you know an American Music Club fan out there, share it with them. If you know somebody who you think might want to be an American Music Club fan, share it with them. If you've got a family and they aren't really interested in music, you know what? Go ahead and share it with them. They may change their minds. Write a review.
If you have friends in other countries who are interested in what American music sounds like, send them to this podcast to listen to two dudes talk about American Music Club.
Yeah, that's right. I think that this is a great place for them to start. So write us a review. Please be honest. We're happy to hear your feedback. Just make sure it's a 5-star review. Like us, subscribe, do all of the things that you people are supposed to do out there. Just watch the end of any YouTube video and what those people say to do. Do the same things, but for this podcast, don't do it for their video, okay? The one that you're watching about bow hunting or whatever it is. Just turn that one off, but do the same things for this.
Do you think there's a lot of crossover between bow hunters and American Music Club fans?
Yeah, without a doubt. I think for sure. I've always felt that. I think if there's one thing an American Music Club fan loves, it's hunting with a bow.
Voodie strikes me as probably a pretty deadly, like, bow hunter. Like he could
bow hunter. Yeah, I mean, look at he's got like lanky arms. He probably pulls the string back real far and really launches that arrow right at his prey.
He's probably got immaculate touch, tasteful bow hunting technique.
That's right. That's right. All right. So Jay William, until next week, thank you. We'll be back soon. Side B of Engine. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.